into Dublin and to get them routed where they want to be in a visually appealing manner. So these are the signs that you see around town. The phase 1A and 1B project was constructed in 2017, I believe, and we are planning to finish the project in the remainder of the city next year. It's currently in the detailed design process right now, with construction scheduled to occur next year. The system builds on the Dublin brand and tries to capture the unique architectural and streetscape character of historic Dublin and Bridge Street, and trying to make sure that we adhere to those standards, not only from the wayfinding perspective, the primary wayfinding perspective, but we also incorporated our traffic control signs to also meet those same standards. So in the Bridge Street district, we also have the black framing panels behind all of the signs and black poles to accentuate the all of the traffic control signs. Additionally, we did have to change all of our street name signs. Previously, they were the white letters on the black background, and from a code perspective, the federal government and the state government said that this color scheme was no longer acceptable. So we had to change them to be an acceptable color scheme, and we were allowed to do the black letters on the white background. So that's just the reverse color scheme for the street name signs in historic Dublin and Bridge Street across the board. The other signs that were also included in this wayfinding project are the overhead signs at the roundabout on the east side of the river, at the Riverside 161 roundabout. You'll see flags off to the side of the overhead truss that have the wayfinding component, and then the signs were designed, the large diagrammatic signs overhead were also designed to meet this standard. In addition to the primary wayfinding project, we have the secondary wayfinding project. And this is really meant to be focused on the shared use path system to provide residents and visitors directional information through the use of on-path markings on our shared use paths. The secondary wayfinding study, which was conducted in coordination with the primary wayfinding initiative, was completed in 2019, so just last year. The final recommendations and the concepts were presented to CSAC and the Bicycle Friendly Advisory Committee, which is, we shorten that to call them BFCAT, in the first quarter of 2020. And these recommendations are being incorporated into a pilot project as a series of loops, new bike loops identified throughout the city for the 2021 bike season. These stickers that you see on the pavement were part of a phase 1 pilot project that was implemented for the Cyclo de Milo last year in 2019, and to celebrate Bike Month, which is May. So from the rec center down Emerald Parkway and to the historic district, there were mile markers and arrows to help guide folks to the historic district. And then once you arrived in the district, there were the stickers here that show drinks, ice cream, and more ice cream, I guess, yum, to be able to get to those businesses and to support them. Another thing that's coming our way in the secondary bike path system, though, or in the secondary wayfinding system, excuse me, is that we have the, what is it called? I always get this wrong. The Central Ohio Greenways project, which is called the COG, and it is a bike path system of national significance. It's a trail network. It has trails, shared use paths, and other types of connections across the country it has over 230 miles in the central Ohio area and a lot more across the nation, to create an integrated set of trails from one community to the next, so that you can use biking as a longer recreational system, or as a commuting system, depending on your comfort level with bike travel. In February, just this past February, the COG board approved a trail designation. So this is very good for Dublin, that it would extend from Bridge Park over to Dublin Road, up to Brand Road, over to the Glacier Ridge Metro Park. And this would then obviously extend through the historic district. There is some conversation as to whether or not we want to include the Ped Bridge in that designated trail from Bridge Park over to Glacier Ridge, or whether we want to use 161. Those discussions are still to be had and will be determined in the next few months. But you will likely see additional trailblazers along that route that I just described that will guide folks from Bridge Park over to the Metro Park, Glacier Ridge Metro Park. So the next steps for that project are going to be finalizing those loops and implementing the next pilot project. So getting those wayfinding markers and determining how we want that to appear aesthetically, and then to continue to engage MORPC and the City of Columbus to identify additional potential trails and expand the overall accessibility. But those are some of the larger goals that Dublin has for our trail network, and specifically how it relates to the historic district. And finally, let's see, how am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Finally, another large initiative that we have going on, or that we hope to get going in 2021, is a curbside management study. I noticed Councilmember Fox is on the meeting this afternoon, so I hope this rings true for her, as I want you to know that we heard you loud and clear when we worked with you recently on some of the parking initiatives in the area, and really thinking about how to best manage our valuable curbside with the competing interests and needs of e-commerce, freight, loading zones, on-demand deliveries, ride hailing, handicap needs, microtransit, shuttles. All of those types of mobility are very important in Dublin. And we want to make sure that we create a comprehensive plan to address all of those needs, so that we can manage this very valuable curbside in a unified manner across the district, both in historic Dublin and of course in Bridge Park. The goal is to potentially develop maybe something called a loading management zone, or some other communities are using that terminology. Whether that's what we wind up with, yet to be determined. But what we want is legal short-term commercial drop-offs, pickups, create that implementation plan, and help make the streets safer and easier to navigate for everyone: drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, deliveries, shuttles, ride hailing, all of those initiatives.
Jeannie, we don't have much, but if you want to pop up the last graphic, that might help.
Yes, thank you. So here are some of the examples of some of the things that we've tried to do in order to address those concerns. But this study, the design and the intent of this study is to take these efforts to the next level, to create that much more organized plan that we can all reflect back and use in order to manage our curbsides. So with that, that is the conclusion of the prepared materials that I have. I will be happy to try to answer any questions that the group may have.
Thank you, Jeannie. I actually have a question. I'll start off.
Great.
For sidewalks in the historic district, is it an automatic consideration that they be of brick material, or is that, how does that decision get to be made? Whether it's an asphalt path, whether it's concrete, whether it's brick?
So in our historic district, within those limits, that we typically, our first and our initial go-to for sidewalk material will be the paver itself, particularly around the historic core, Bridge and High. Maybe as we start to extend away from the district, we start to look at other materials. Brick sidewalks are exponentially more expensive than the concrete, so sometimes that also plays into the decision making. But so, for example, on the Franklin Street Extension project, if I zoom in here, you will see very quickly that we will match what is in the rest of the district, excuse me, and south of Bridge Street for the Franklin Street, this project. We will also extend brick down to that first alley. South of that first alley, when we hit that more residential area along Franklin Street, we are planning to switch to the concrete.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Jeannie, what is the extent of extending the sidewalk to the south there through the residential area? Where
Down
does
to
it go?
Waterford.
Waterford. Okay.
All the
And
way
is
down.
that part of phase 2?
That's actually part of the Franklin Street improvements. So it's actually, so there's 3 projects. The first 2, the phase 1, phase 2 are the overhead utility burial. And then on the heels of the conclusion of the phase 1 of the overhead utility burial, we're going to come in and do the improvements to Franklin Street. It's a little confusing.
Gotcha. No, that's a good clarification. Thank you.
Jeannie, I'd like to ask, are the sidewalks on Franklin Street going to go on both sides or just one side of the street?
I believe that they are planned for both sides.
For both sides.
And
along with that, are you planning to narrow the street, or are the sidewalks going to go into more into people's yards?
They will go into the people's yards. We are not planning on moving the curb.
is there a reason why you're not moving the curb? Because from John Wright Lane down to Waterford, it's probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet narrower down there.
So
Franklin.
So to move the curb, it would mean that we have to move all of the storm structures, all of the drainage, and it would become
There is no
extraordinarily expensive
no
to do all that. Pardon me?
There is no storm drainage in that section. There's only storm drainage from John Wright south. It's gutter curbs along the north side there. So it's just a point of curiosity, because I think that the narrower streets help to control traffic speed and also make it a more similar to the look and feel of the rest of the historic district with the narrower streets.
So this project, install and repair, blah, 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 install concrete sidewalks to Waterford, concrete aprons. Oh, and it does include the concrete aprons for all drives. And then we're going to repave the street. So it has the curb and gutter. Yeah, so it's got curb and gutter. It looks to me the whole way.
Yeah, they just don't exist now, is my point. So, I mean, if that was the reason why they didn't want to narrow the street down there, then they may want to take another look at that.
It is unlikely that we would move the curb line to install sidewalk. It's going to be very honest about that.
No, I'm thinking in terms of in general narrowing the street to make it look more like the rest of the district. But that's I don't know how far they are in that design work.
Right,
Does
right.
anybody have an opinion on that, or am I? No?
Ellen, can you repeat your question, please?
No, I was just curious because the Franklin Street is extremely wide, much more like a suburban subdivision kind of a street from John Wright up to Bridge Street. And the question we've always had is, you know, if they're going to be doing any significant work, is there any issue with narrowing the street to make it look more like the rest of the historic district? And, you know, and in conjunction with all the work that's being done here, is there any reason why we just couldn't do that? That would also mitigate some of the, we don't have a problem with it, but some of our neighbors I know are going to be fighting the sidewalk issue.
Yeah, because there's a couple of big trees that probably would have to come down,
Right.
putting the
Well,
sidewalk.
we would do our very best to, I mean, what we typically do is do our very, very best to avoid impacts to trees. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be any trees impacted. I'm sure that there will be, but you know, if there are trees that are significant, we do our best to try to avoid those kinds of impacts. Maybe we'll scoot the sidewalk a little back up closer to the back of curb in a couple of areas so that trees can, you know, stay in place. Those kinds of details haven't been sorted through yet.
What size, if it, let's say that there would be impact on it, do you
Mhm.
have to have a certain amount of tree lawn space, or can that be narrower?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can squeeze down that tree lawn sometimes in order to avoid those impacts to trees. And we do that on a fairly regular basis.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
The only other question I had is about the lighting on Franklin.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure I understood. Right now, we just have, I think, two
The
big,
Cobra head.
The
Yeah.
Cobra heads, yeah.
and what were you planning to put down there?
So we haven't decided on a, you know, a place per place replacement plan. I don't know exactly which Cobra heads would be replaced, but I would imagine that we would replace, if we were to replace a certain fixture, that we would do it with something similar that we've used on South High Street. So if you take a look at what those light fixtures look like, we would replicate that style over here.
Could we go with a lower intensity light than what's on South High Street?
Probably, yeah, we could probably work with the color temperature so it gets a little warmer, maybe a little more yellow. There are
Yeah.
things like that that we can do. We can also add like frosted glass to diffuse the light a little bit more, you know, things like that. But again, I don't know from a location specific which ones will be slated for replacement. So
Will the ARB have input onto those kinds of decisions when you get to that design point?
Like,
I don't think so.
can
We
this-
we haven't had to do that too much, so I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
So can the residents of the street, can we have input on what types of, you know, lights we wanted to go here on Franklin Street?
In terms of probably the color temperature and maybe the glass, I would say yes. In terms of style and the actual pole and things like that, I would probably say we would stick with our standard. We would not want anything special for like, you know, like 2 or 3 lights. That's not typically what we do.
My question is,
Maintenance very difficult.
we like High Street, but not necessarily what's over on Bridge Street. That's a little bit.
Correct. So I said High Street in particular because I felt that had the more same scale that we would be looking for on Franklin Street versus the ones that are on Bridge Street. Because I couldn't imagine us putting the double heads, you know, that are on Bridge Street down Franklin Street. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And last question I have is are the lines going to be buried on Mill Lane? Last time we spoke to somebody, they said they were not going to bury the ones on Mill Lane. Is that happening?
I believe that the answer to that question is yes. So I believe that with the phase 1 project at the southern end of Mill Lane, I believe there's about 250 feet that will be buried And then in phase 2, the remainder of Mill Lane will be buried. That's the intent of the phase 1, well, part of the phase 1 project, but also the phase 2 project. So that's definitely included in the current scope.
Okay.
There's some very high capacity lines. Are those included? They go from just behind Starbucks down to Eberly Lane, and then they cut over to High Street. Those lines would also be buried?
I believe that the answer to that is yes. I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that the answer is yes.
Good. Very nice.
Okay, well,
That's going to really, all the work that you've laid out here, I think is really going to,
yeah,
improve the look. And
Yeah, these are some massive, massive improvements, and they're not easy because we have some confined space. I mean, it's tight back here. So, and there's rock. So it makes it a little more challenging, which is why you see some of these costs that are pretty high to complete these projects. But we do believe that they will provide some very impactful enhancements to the district.
yes, yeah. Well, for the record, I'm happy about it.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it.
Hey, Jeannie, I had a question about the utility burial.
Okay.
When you guys do that, will roads be shut down, or do we just kind of do it in segments where we can keep everything?
That I don't know. I don't know about the maintenance of traffic on these
Okay.
plans. These are being designed by AEP. I
Okay.
know that if there are impacts to traffic, there will be plenty of notification. I can't imagine that there's going to be impacts to traffic. There's
Yeah.
no way we can build this without it. So,
Right.
but we will communicate. That I can
Okay.
promise.
Okay. I know a couple of our members have businesses in the district, so.
Fair
And-
enough.
Thanks to, I took notes. So
Oh, good.
thank you
Oh,
so
wow.
much for the for the thorough explanation of all the work. It's really greatly appreciated. And to follow up on Tammy's question, when you reroute all of the utilities to the back of the properties there on
Yes.
South High Street, is
Yes.
there going to be a cost to the landowners and property owners for like the re-hookups for the electric and gas lines and, spectrum and all of that?
I have not heard that up to this point. I can't promise that won't be the case, but right now I have not heard that.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Jeannie, I have a couple more questions, but I don't want to
Sure.
jump in. Somebody else wanted to say something?
No, go ahead. I'll wait till the end.
I was going to say, Kim.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim. I had one question too, but you go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So one of the questions that came up in our last meeting was about the tree lawn on High Street, that
Okay.
the sidewalk's pretty tight. And is there any plans, or is it possible that the sidewalk could be extended to the curb? And so you have more paved space for people to circulate?
So on South High, North High, on North
South
High, I
High.
believe it's South High. I'm actually going to let Sean talk about that because he's going to talk about the tree replacement project coming up. And that might be a little more up where what he's talking about. Right now, I know that there are no plans to do that. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do it. But
The thought was that if you have to take out the utility poles and do
Yeah.
some work in there, and while you're messing around with that area, of whether it's possible to consider that. And maybe it's not going all the way south, but at least where there's, I don't know how far it would go, but enough where there's businesses that there's more capacity for foot traffic.
right. Like I said, right now, that is not in any of the plans or in any of the cost estimates. And that would increase those costs fairly substantially.
Okay. It could be a recommendation of the task force, though.
It could
For
definitely be
future,
a
yeah.
recommendation from the task force. Absolutely.
Sean, did you want to
Kim,
talk?
Kim, when you see my presentation, you may change your thoughts a little bit, but by all
That's
means.
kind of why I said that.
Yeah, I'm not recommending it. It was just a question that came up, and I thought you guys would be the best people to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, our standard answer is on stuff like that. We can engineer just about anything. It's just how much money do we want to throw at it, and what's the look that we want. But
Right.
there's a reason why I said I'm going to let Sean also talk about that, because I happen to know some of the plans that he has from the South High Street tree replacement project. So stay tuned. How about that?
Yep. Let's
Okay.
table that till Sean's piece.
Let's put that in the parking lot.
Yep. And the other question I had was related to wayfinding.
Okay.
We had a lot of discussion in our last couple meetings about historic information about the district and whether there could actually be some kind of a barcode system that people could, take their smartphones and they could, not a barcode, but a QR code, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Yeah, and has there been any thought as part of the signage to develop some kind of electronic system like that?
Do you know what? Yeah, there's been quite a bit of discussion about that, as a matter of fact. And I do believe those are thoughts that the project team, that project team is actually thinking about and contemplating how to integrate it. Those are some of the details that haven't been sussed out yet, but it is definitely something that they're thinking about, and how they'd like for it to tie to a bikeway map and on your phone, and how it would integrate with your bike computer or whatever. So there are definitely those kinds of thoughts rolling around out there, but they haven't gotten to that level of detail yet.
It's come up several times, and I think members of the task force would think that would be an additive feature to the historic district.
Yeah.
So we would be advocates, I think, is what I'm hearing from others, that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, I believe that JM and his project team has been working on that as well.
Great. Oh, and one other, I have another question. In terms of your curbside
Oh yeah.
idea, is that just controlling the curbside, or is there a thought about maybe directing deliveries and things to the alleys and keep some of the activity off of High Street?
So that could definitely be a recommendation of the plan. We don't have that plan. The study's not even funded yet. I'm really hoping that we will be able to get that funding for that project for the 2021 calendar year. But yes, I mean, I would go into that study with no preconceived notions as to how things would operate. I would be looking to the consultant team to make their best recommendation on how we should manage our valuable curbside, and trying to reserve those best spots for our handicapped, our ride share, our micro transit, our shuttles, things like that. I know that we are having a lot of issues with deliveries and our loading zones. It continues to be problematic. So managing that and finding a place where we want them to be is going to be of the utmost importance if we are fortunate enough to get that funding.
Great. I'm going to pass the floor to my co-chair.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the extending Franklin Street.
Okay.
If there's a new traffic light there,
Yes.
Franklin Street, will there still be the light up at the cemetery and the school drive?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Those would be fairly close together, so I was just curious.
Yep. They will remain.
Along those lines, Jeannie, the existing Starbucks crosswalk, is there a reason why we couldn't also keep that?
Well, yes, because the crossing that would be established with the traffic signal will actually establish right of way. And there does seem to be some consternation about the Darby Street crosswalk and it not assigning right away. And it's like 100 feet away. So we would not want there to be conflicting messages or confusion about the overhead crosswalk that does not assign right away in between two signalized intersections that does assign right away. So it really is in the best interest. We conducted a citywide crosswalk study, and the results of that study recommended that when the traffic signal was installed, that the overhead crosswalk be removed for clarity.
And you also didn't say anything about changing any curb parking or anything in that downtown area on Bridge Street. So I'm assuming there's no plans to make any changes there.
Correct. Now, further to the west, as we cross the school frontage, what is currently the school frontage, there are some long-term visions about adding on-street parking to Bridge Street where we can actually move the curb, but in its current configuration within the historic district, in that really tight area, there's just no room to add on-street parking.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. These are all great questions. Thank you.
So Jeannie, I have a question. I
I'm
think
so surprised.
Yeah, oh, I know.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, I know you are. I want to make sure everybody's had a chance though, because it's really the task force question time. So holistically, when we think about the curb management and Franklin Street extension,
Yeah.
And you made some great comments about bike greenway, the Central Ohio Greenway project, which then would increase biking in the historic district. How are you looking at the use of the roadways for bicycles? Because like right now, a bikeway is on South High Street and it's the brick sidewalk, which isn't practical. Nobody ever rides their bike on it, but that's the way the bikeway says. And so we have these gaps in the historic district where you really need to get off the High Street to go either the alleys or through Waterford or Franklin. How are you incorporating multi bicycle use on multi roads instead of just maybe one loop through the historic district, or is that not possible?
It's not possible. I mean, so state of Ohio, certainly encourages bike use in the roadway. So where you're not comfortable being on, say, the brick sidewalk, or where it's tight, like what we talked about last night, it's riding on the road, taking the lane is always an option for a cyclist anywhere in the state of Ohio. That doesn't mean that that's always the best and most perfect solution. So there are initiatives across the city looking at how to complete those gaps. I don't know if there is a current study that is going to address that at this point in time, but it's definitely something that we can put on our radar and try to figure out how to manage that a little bit better.
Yeah, I was just thinking with the Franklin Street extension, Franklin Street is a much easier bike ride than High Street is.
Yeah, sure it would be.
And if curb management is part of the study, then maybe the extension, and there's a crossing there, maybe the biking can happen along that roadway instead of along the High Street roadway, connecting to North Street, connecting to the bridge. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm just thinking it might be more practical than parking cars or loading. Maybe that's a bike lane. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah. Or maybe we just designate it and we add signs and pavement markings to help get folks over to Franklin Street and use that as their bikeway, lower traffic, lower speeds, things like that as well. So fewer conflict points.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a lot more kids on bikes. They're out there on the bikes, but they have to weave in and out of traffic in order to get from one end of the historic district to the other, which is where they go.
Right.
Safely.
Yeah.
Sidewalks along High Street are still going to be tight even after all the work is done on South High Street.
Right.
just some good marking, some good indicators and things. Bike thoroughfare or bike lanes through here. You can use Mill Lane or Franklin, and it's a great way for bikes to kind of traverse that area without
Nice.
running people down and kids having to go on the street.
Yeah.
Right. A couple other questions. One is on signage. Right now, if you go through the historic district, I don't think it's the case so much in Bridge Street because it's fairly new, but in the historic district, there's a lot of sign clutter. And I think we mentioned last night, even signage that gets in the way of ADA accessibility. Is there a way to give a good review of the historic district to rid ourselves of old signs, unnecessary signs, street clutter, things that make it difficult to manage the sidewalks and, that sort of thing?
That's a really good point. And that is, sign clutter is always the very first thing that we think of before we post any new sign, anywhere in Dublin, frankly, not just the historic district. And the primary reason is that there's, like you said, there's so much sign activity out there in the public right of way that it is absolutely critical, essential that any sign that we place is sending a critical message, because so much of it gets overlooked, right? It becomes white noise. People have a tendency to filter it and don't even realize what signs are present. So we need to really reserve that space, that it's precious, to install another sign. So people say, well, why can't you just install another sign? Well, that is the exact reason why we don't.
Right.
So yes, I mean, we can always go out and take another look. We have done sign audits in the recent past, removing signs, particularly with the parking signs, the old blue Ps that used to be out there with the circles, those have all been removed. So there have been a lot of those kinds of efforts and initiatives already put in place, basically, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that is important as if there's combined signs, things like that. And
absolutely. We are in
on the lights
agreement.
that the suitors made. I noticed when we put the LED lights in the traditional fixtures, it changed the mood of the street quite a bit. It tended to be more of a more urban look in a historic area. Going to a warmer light in the historic district, I think lighting can create a mood. And I think if we can warm the temperatures of those lights to a more incandescent feel.
So we do have the incandescent bulb in the lower portion of the head itself.
It's underwhelmed. It's underwhelmed by the bright light of the ring above, which looks almost fluorescent, and that gives the larger glow than the original.
So to change those lights in the existing fixtures is not going to be easy, and that one's going to be kind of expensive to do. We started doing some research into that not too long ago. One of the things that we came up with that might be a better cost-effective solution, or more cost-effective solution, is to change out those the lenses, the clear glass, and changing that maybe to more of a frosted or a water glass or something like that, that would diffuse that light a little bit differently, but it would have a much lower price tag associated with it versus changing that actual color temperature of the LED ring up in the hood of the fixture itself.
Yeah, I think that's worth looking at. It's very strong. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is something that we have already taken a quick look at.
Right. And just one quick thing that I'll mention to you that I heard at the 33 corridor is that Marysville is intending to put a shared use bike path all the way down Industrial Parkway to connect Dublin and Marysville. Just FYI, you may or may not have heard it, but I heard it the other. So it's kind of nice with this Greenway project to know that that's a possibility for.
And as we get, as we complete the shared use paths down along Highland Croy and across 161 with the interchange project, we are planning to extend the shared use path all through the interchange. So from Highland Croy over to Eiderman Road, and then it already exists all over to Industrial Parkway. We'll have a very nice connection.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I don't see any takers, but this has been really great. You guys have really clarified a lot of stuff for us, and obviously a lot of great plans in the work. So it's all very encouraging.
Yeah, there's a lot of effort being expended here in the district. So it's all very exciting and impactful things for the district. We're excited about them.
Great. Thank you both very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeannie and Tina.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies, thank you very much. Sean, I did promise that you would be our speaker somewhere around 5 o'clock. So hopefully we've honored our agreement. I think you're still
unmute myself before I start talking.
I think Kim said this the best. He said that's going to be the phrase of this year is you're on mute.
So good evening, everybody. And I'll give you some of my thoughts for projects and such that are going on down here in the South, or not South High Street, but South High Street is one of them, but in the historic district in the surrounding zone here. Let me share my screen and we'll jump right into the South High Street stuff, seeing how that was a point that was kind of carried here in the comments. So I'll push that to the front of my presentation here. See if it shows up. Moved. Does everybody see my screen? Maybe not.
Yes.
We see it.
We're good.
Okay, so you got South High Street improvements up?
Yep.
Okay. My screen where everybody's video is not showing it, so I was not sure it was showing. So anyway, let me give you a little bit of a background here. So South High Street, obviously, you all know the trees that came down because of AEP and the lines that Jeannie talked about earlier being moved. And in preparation for some of this, although what I'm going to talk about is actually going to precede the lines being moved, but will then parts of this will get worked on after the fact as well. We're working with our community development committee on trying to get that streetscape re-envisioned, bring the trees back to bring back that shaded, walkable part of the town that we lost, hopefully temporarily. But part of the reason why we lost, besides the power lines, but part of the reason why we lost the trees is they were in decline already because mainly there was not much soil available to those trees. So going forward, we tried to find a solution to provide these canopy trees with the recommended around 1,000 cubic feet of soil per tree to give you a nice canopy tree that has a long life. And hopefully, the trees that were planted there, I think currently the oaks were about 15, maybe 20 years old, and we're starting to see their decline. So we're hoping these will last, 50 years or 80 years in retrospect. So what we're showing here is a plan. Now I've got an area clouded on the southwest, which is where we're going to start. Hopefully this fall is the plan of at least getting the parts in place. You'll see the dark black line that kind of runs with the trees. Those are actually retaining walls. So in a lot of the blocks here, we actually have a retaining condition where the sidewalk sits a little higher than the roadway. And what we want to do is push those trees down to the curb level so that we can take advantage of what's called a silvicell or a suspended pavement system, where you can see the gray bands kind of along here. If you can see my cursor, those gray bands are taking the place where the on-street parking is currently. So we're going to dig that area out. We're going to put these milk crate looking cells in the ground, backfill them with good planting soil, to give nutrients to the trees, and then repave back over the top and put the parking spaces back. But it'll give those trees that volume of soil that currently today they don't have, because it's all compacted, gravel and roadway construction, compacted soils and such. So this will give us that opportunity to provide a growing medium for these trees, so they'll be healthy and they'll last a lot longer. So right now we're concentrating, like I said, on this west side. Here's an image of, if it popped up, I'm hoping you see it. Here's a photoshopped image of what we're talking about, and you can kind of see how the sidewalk is elevated versus the curb. We're adding in these stone walls, planting the trees down below, and then you can see kind of where the outline of the parking spaces is, and that's where the civil cells or structure or suspended soil or suspended pavement system will be placed, so the roots can get down into those zones and give them a much better growing medium. So along with this, obviously we're also going to impact some of the sidewalk, because this wall is going to be right next to the sidewalk. So we're going to have to rework and reset some of the pavers and such that are in this area. Hopefully fix them, because we've noticed there is some degradation in some of that sidewalk. So some of this project will help fix that. We're also going to try to work with engineering on some of their street maintenance or brick pavement maintenance dollars, and try to work that in, so that where we have areas that we run into that have more degradation but are outside of our influence, maybe we can get the same contractor to work that as well and really get a more cohesive project. The image here is also showing the poles, of course, gone, but they will remain for probably the first year or two, maybe 3, before those get pulled, based on what Jeannie's timeframes were. And then those poles will go away, and it'll have plenty of aerial space for these trees to grow in. So this is one image. I'll give you another image here. This is a little further down, but again, we're in a retaining situation. We're going to keep these walls less than 30 inches in height, so that we don't have any handrails or anything like that. It's going to be clean. There'll be a little bit of a high lip that's above the sidewalk with a stone, so that somebody in a wheelchair that can't roll off the edge. We're going to protect that edge. But then for parades and other such things, people will be able to sit along these walls and be able to enjoy. There's room for the doors to open on the cars. They're not going to hit the walls. So we're trying to keep all of that, all of those parts thought of as we've kind of gone out there and looked. There's a couple historic elements, the old carriage steps. Those will stay in place. They'll probably be lowered, but they're going to stay in their exact location they are today. I think there's a hitching post further down south near John Wright Lane. Same thing. We're not going to remove any of that stuff. We may lower it in its current location. So then hopefully, and then in another couple of years, after these trees get a little bit of more time to grow, then we'll look at the east side and adding some additional just on-grade seat walls where we're not in a retaining situation. So here on the east side, you can see left side of the photograph, we'll have a more flat lawn. And in those areas, we can add just seat walls along the sidewalk, so people can sit and rest and bring that old Dublin character, that old Dublin wall character throughout the district. So it'll be a unifying element. Next, I'll go into our Riverside Crossing Park. Obviously, the bridge is complete. You can walk across it. The park on the east side is coming up out of the ground. The West Plaza is getting close to being complete. We're still working through some issues with the handrail over there and getting stone pieces cut to fit. So hopefully that'll be wrapping up here in the next couple months. And then on the west side, so you can see Kokosing has been working to get all the stone and all the laydown area out of there. There's good soil going down now. They're going to be meadow seeding that in the temporary condition until we can get the park plans designed, and then that construction that will happen later. We're still working out where that's going to land within our CIP budgets. But that condition over there will stay in a kind of a meadowish condition for a little while until we get that figured out and design moving and trails in place. We probably will go in there with our own teams and plant some additional trees to start some of that reforestation. But you won't see the kind of more natural development over there happen until we get that managed into our CIP process. So more to come on that as we get that moving. But like I said, we are going to try to do some restoration and adding some trees into that zone and keep that moving, because it's meant to be a more natural area of the park. The east side will be a more, it doesn't have necessarily active recreational uses. It's more passive in a lot of its form, but it's open, it's lawn space, it's pavilion and seating areas and stuff that are more active. The west side will be a little bit more passive and natural. So let's go on to historic bike racks. So we've been working on this for a little while. We finally got the artists' designs locked up. This was a mock-up that they had done. We have identified a number of locations around historic Dublin that we want to install these in some of the more open areas. But this will bring a little bit of an art flair down there, as well as a functional use for bike parking. I think right now, like I know we looked over towards the library, kind of there's some extra space and some sidewalk over there. There was maybe a few places on the south end in some of those larger brick areas at the corners. Even over by, I think it's over by Johnson's Ice Cream, there's a little bit of an area that maybe we might be able to install something like this. These come in a couple different sizes. We built them in a modular base so that they can be kind of set side by side. Maybe, this is a pair of them that are about the same size, but there's one that's smaller, one that's bigger, that we can kind of play around with that a little bit, depending on how much space we have, to get a little variation. So it's not just a bunch of the same thing everywhere. So I wanted to touch base on that. That's something that we're working towards. We'll get some bike rack funding again in, I believe, 22, and I think we're going to try to get that done and installed. River access, I'll just touch base on this, and this kind of goes back to the west park here. It's always been the plan as part of these plans to get river access, a kayak launch or so that's installed down with this. But again, as we work those plans in the years coming, once we get the CIP figured out, we'll be getting that. There are access points today. If you go up here under 270, there is an parking area, and you can walk down the path with a kayak and launch on the shore. It's very easy access. And also up at Dublin Springs, there's another location up there that you can get into to launch kayaks. So there are a few existing places. We're hoping to get something that's a little more friendly, with some parking available to get closer to it and be ADA accessible. So those are yet to come, like I said, with the park. Let's see here. Let's jump to benches. Just let me change my share screen here a little bit. If I can get to it. Where's my unshare? There we go. So let me share this screen. So here in Discovery, can anybody see that? Oh, wait a minute. Anybody see that? In Discovery here?
Yes, it's up.
Okay. So I know that we have installed some benches along North High Street with some of the COVID response items with the pizza shop and such. We are actively looking at locations around where we can we have enough right of way and there's enough space to install some benches. I know, for example, Frog Park here, it's been on my radar for a little while now to rearrange what's in there, because I think it's very inefficient in how it's laid out. I think we can get some better seating in here with better access to the frog and better visibility. So that's been on my radar to get moving. But like I said, also just wanted to touch base because I know this is a concern that was brought up in some of the notes you guys have sent out. We are looking at different areas and where we can get some more benches where it makes sense. So let me jump on to maintenance. I'm not sure how many know this last year, we actually changed our contract maintenance up a little bit so that the historic core Bridge Street area, and let me reshare a screen. You see the maintenance map here? Now maybe?
I only see Discovery. There you go.
There you go. So to make sure we had a little better coverage and because the historic core used to be part of North and South's contracts. In this last year, when we rebid the contracts, we carved that area out to make it a little bit smaller and have a little bit more attention. And we put some real, solid language into that contract to make them understand this area is really scrutinized, and we're going to expect them to be at a little bit higher standard than maybe some areas that aren't as well traveled. So I just wanted to point out, let you guys know that we have looked at this and we are pushing a little bit higher maintenance levels in these areas, and we're staying active with that. Some of the new streetscape stuff that came in off of 270 and 33, and looking at some of the extensions of some of that same idea, bringing in some more walls and such along High Street, West Bridge Street in the future plans. So just wanted to touch base on that. And with that, I guess I'll open it up to questions. Whatever you got.
Hi, Sean. This is Kathy. I have a couple of questions for you. One I think the treescape looks amazing. I was wondering, are tulip trees considered native Ohio trees?
Tulips are. We are utilizing a specific cultivar called Emerald City, because we didn't, a typical tulip tree is going to get a pretty wide canopy. And with the area that we have to work with down there, we don't want the canopy pushing into the buildings. So we picked a cultivar that's got a very specific growth habitat or habit that the canopy will get about 25 feet, 30 feet wide total. So you're talking 15 feet, which fits the streetscape in this corridor.
Okay. And then I was also, I was just wondering if you had any pictures of what that area between the curb and the retaining wall looks like. Is that like a grassy area along there, or?
So our plans are still being worked out. GPD group is fast and furious trying to get those set so we can bid them. We have kind of gone back and forth with ideas of either a ground cover or lawn. It could be mulched as well. I know there's going to be some maintenance challenges with getting down behind or in front of that wall and cutting between the trees. So the ground cover option is something, something that's steppable, because people are going to be able to lean against that wall or sit on that wall. But it could be some mulch areas and lawn as well. We're still working through what ultimately that needs to be.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it seems people will be stepping there, just getting in and out of parked cars too.
Yeah, definitely know that. And whatever we put in there, we want to make sure that it's something that can survive some foot traffic.
Yeah.
The other thing I forgot to mention too, and you see some of it already in this image here, there's some existing steps. We're going to work trying to keep those and then add a few more. I know they don't show in this length of wall that we're showing here. This was a rendering just to get the idea of the walls. but we will have some other steps because we don't want you to get out of your car and have to walk down the street to get up to the sidewalk. So every once in a while, we'll have steps that will pop through that wall.
Okay, thank you. That's all I
Hey,
had.
Hey, Sean, could I build on Kathy's point? So
Sure.
what's the dimension between the curb and the wall?
I think we've got, I want to say it's somewhere between 4 and 6 feet, I think that entire length. And we are going to basically, to build this wall, what we're looking at is doing some kind of a block wall as a base, and then putting the natural stone veneer on it so that it looks just like it did down at the Vets Memorial. It's the same exact layered stone that we have around all the rest of our walls. It's just that because we can't do a dry stack and hold up the retaining, we have to have that CMU back. And what we did down at the Vets Memorial on the large wall at the corner of Rock Crest and North High Street, that's exactly how that rock wall was built. It's a CMU wall in the back, and then there is a actual natural stone that they cut and mortared it to the wall, and then they raked back the mortar joints to make it look more like a dry stack wall. And that's what we've been talking about and trying to mimic with this to make it look like the natural stone walls. But to your point, so that block wall will basically sit right at the edge of the sidewalk. So you'll have 3 or 4 inches of stone that will stick out from there, and then the remaining tree lawn area will be tree lawn area still in this plan.
So the back of the wall goes right to the sidewalk. So it's sidewalk from yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I missed, so the length that you're doing is from Bridge Street down to
John Wright Lane.
Okay.
And there are about 3.5 blocks that are in retaining condition. Here's the first block that's got retaining up through where the tavern is. And then as you get down to John Wright Lane, there's a section of that block that kind of comes back down flush. So we'll have a little bit here and then down to about that point where it starts to come back flush where we'll be retaining.
I hadn't appreciated that you're replacing all the trees from that dimension. I had heard that there was some trees taken out and that they were going to be replaced. That's what Dana had reported. But so
yeah, we've been working pretty heavily back and forth with CDC and council and Dana, and trying to come up with a plan that's long term. That, like I said, provides enough soil so these trees can age well. We won't have any issues with stress. And then, coming up with something with the rock wall, the whole part of this is to make sure the trees can access all that soil that's under the pavement by bringing them down, but also gives us opportunities later where if we'd have planted the tree on the slope and then wanted to do something with a streetscape at a later date, we'd had to take the trees back out to do whatever we wanted. This puts the trees in the optimal position. So whatever we have to do behind the walls will be, available and able to be done without affecting the trees per se. The other part of the detail I didn't mention on the block wall. So our idea right now, because we don't want to put a footing down on this wall that goes all the way deep and blocks the roots. So now we're in the street only, right? So we're going to come up with a pier system with a grade beam that sits on top that supports these blocks that sit above it.
Well, I applaud you for using the silver cells because that's the solution to the problem of urban trees. So that's a big investment to do that, and I think that's great. Yeah,
I mean that's how we get the long-term survivability here. It really is. It's the only way. There's obviously, we're not moving buildings out of the way to create more space, and there's not much room in the street. So.
John, I have a quick question. Is there any room along the street here for planters for flowers, or is there a plan to like hang flowers from the lights? Is there any plan for flowers or anything like that in a planter?
There was talk about some planters on the light poles at one point throughout this. We've concentrated down on trying to get the streetscape in place initially. But I think there's opportunities where, you know, some of these bulb outs at the ends, I think just up the road, or just on the north end of this block, there's a little bigger, or maybe I'm sorry, no, it's behind us. There's a bigger kind of brick area that provides some opportunity for maybe some planters or something. The sidewalks are pretty narrow. I mean, there might be a chance to put something down between the trees. We'd have to really look at that and see what really makes the most sense. Or we could just, like we talked about earlier, maybe in some instances between the trees, we plant some ground covers or stuff with flowers that can brighten that up.
I have a question. I love the design. I think I'm very excited about that. I am a property owner and a store owner in the south end of the High Street. So my question is, during construction, the street's going to be torn up and the easement's going to be torn up and the sidewalk's going to be torn up. So for foot traffic, I know you can't park there during construction, but would pedestrians and patrons still have access to the stores during that time? Or, you know, what's your kind of thoughts on that? Because that's, you know, vital to everyone's business during that time.
We are definitely going to work that with the MOT and how to make that access. Obviously, your businesses need to be accessed. So we're going to have to work that out with the construction. Like you said, the parking spaces obviously have to be dug up when that happens. And right now, I think the way the planning of this is going, that'll probably the actual street construction, if all else fails, the stone walls and the trees will go in this fall. But the street construction may push into the spring just because we're going to run out of time for asphalt to repave the street. So the hope is that the interruptions on the sidewalk itself will be minor and contained, and it'll kind of move down the way, and we'll have to work through ensuring that there's access to all the residents and stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Sean, I have a question about the bike racks.
Sure.
I noticed that they're really modern looking, but we've been trying to make a cohesive historic feel in downtown. I don't feel like that fits the details that we're trying to fit together for downtown, historic downtown.
So let me there's a historic aspect to this. I mean, it's art.
I know it doesn't, it looks very modern and contemporary compared to, there's a bike rack downtown that is an old fashioned bicycle that has a much more historic feel to it.
And I'm aware of that one. We were, as part of an art, because this was really brought forward by the DAC and working with them and Kurt Getman, who was our older our art person in the past. But we were trying to find something that kind of was a iconic art piece that could be, and this was only going to be installed in historic Dublin in a few locations. But the idea was the bird that you see and the, I'm going to probably not be as eloquent as our architects were that designed these, but the wishbone, the idea of the herring of the river, the shape of the birds, the bridge, it mimics that kind of needle in a way, and how the bird's form is. All of these things were part of that. I know there was some discussion about wanting some artwork in the historic Dublin area. This may not, and like I said, we're not proposing that it's going to be in every bike rack location, but this was our idea to try to meld the two in a way. I mean, we're obviously open to any comments on this and where and how, and working through this with you all, but this was what was brought forward earlier last year.
I agree. I think art is very personal, and I know people spend a lot of time on this design. I think it looks, I'm going to be very forward. I think it looks out of place. I don't think it fits with the architecture of the buildings.
It
So
doesn't.
I agree.
I agree, and it looks dangerous too.
There might be other places to put it though. You know, down by the river, in the new park by Bridge Park area. I could definitely see that in other places, but not in historic downtown.
We love them.
Sean, we love them.
So I have a question, and now that we're having this conversation about art, because it came up a while back when the Car Barn property on the corner of Waterford and High got a piece of artwork, and it upset the historic district neighborhood. So the question I would throw out to the historic task force is, with the suggestions of the streetscape, benches, planters, bike racks, should these elements, before they're placed in the historic district, be brought forward to the Architectural Review Board for consideration? Because they are going to change the feel of the historic district. And so I'm asking that question. I would like you to think about that, because you know, the Architectural Review Board feels as if they have a pretty good handle on what happens down there. And these are a lot of elements in the landscape that change the character too. So what do you think about that?
Just to piggyback off of what you said, Jane, in working with architectural review boards in other states for residential and commercial projects, they are very opinionated about their the kind of feel and the philosophies and the culture that they want to create for that community that they're have developed or trying to develop. And it starts with like the architecture of the buildings that they're preserving in this area, but it goes to color, the style of the roofs, even they call out even the types of trees and shrubs that you're are allowed to have in some communities. So I think that for things like this, it should definitely be put forth to review by the Architectural Review Board as a, you know, as a, not a contingency, but so that they can weigh in, because they, you know, those are experts of their own right. They have artistic backgrounds. There are architects, I'm sure, on that committee as well as, you know, as a mix of people with other expertise. I just think that it lends more credence to kind of to preserve the culture of the, in this case, the historic district. I think that's really important to have them do that.
So I also feel like there should be a comprehensive look at the things that are done in the historic district, so things tie together well. However, correct me if I'm wrong, the Architectural Review Board has a single architect usually on the board. I don't know that they have any urban design people or urban planning people or you know, people with any kind of art credentials or anything like that. And it would concern me that people without that kind of a background, you know, could potentially, you know, shoot down or you know, basically make the look of some of the artistic endeavors into less than what they are. And Jane, you brought up the Carr House installation. And we love that. You know, that was, you know, intended to be kind of a memory or a shadow of what happened in the historic district on that property with the shopsmith or the blacksmith shop and so on. And you know, we walk by that every day, and it, you know, it brings brings joy to us. So,
you know, you're right. That it is a beautiful piece, but it took public input to get to that compared to what originally was. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not recommending anything. I'm asking this group to think about when, with all of these elements, if it weren't for this task force, no one would see it. It would just show up on the street. So my question would be, should it go through some public review in the historic district before we get to the point where it just lands there?
yes, I agree with that.
I agree, but the thing I think we all have to keep in mind is most of the artwork, at least the ones that I've seen in Dublin, have to do something with the history or the environment of Dublin. And I think that's why I like this so much, is because not only we're bike riders, so I see two, and I'm Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I see a bike rider and I see a bird. So, you know, you have the two aspects of that, and obviously Dublin is filled with nature. We have the river. I mean, you could use this as, you know, we see the herons down by the river all the time, which I sort of shapes to me like a heron, and then a bike rider. I mean, I don't find that offensive at all. I really like this. And I think if we're going to do, you know, get input, you know, let's make sure that people are looking at it. Okay, how is this historically or environmentally tie into Dublin? If they don't think it does, okay, then we pitch it. But I think, you know, looking at it that way, that may be a different way of, you know, getting some input from people.
Right.
The other piece I just wanted to share is we did have, as part of the group that reviewed this, I can't remember their name. The Historic Business Group was a part of this this process of picking the artist and reviewing the art. I don't remember if Kurt took it to ARB or not. Jane, I'm not positive.
I don't think so. And you know, it's not just the art that I guess I'm asking the question of.
Sure.
When you talk about all the different elements that happen on the street, as I look at the stone wall, I'm glad you said there's going to be some steps. I worry that the stone wall will look contemporary and not have the rough face that you see in the old stone walls. And I think it's important that when we do stone walls, that they have as traditional a look as possible, right? So those are the kinds of things that ARB may pick over. But more importantly, I think it's just the question here I want to throw out as to whether or not ARB should be having an opportunity to talk about what happens on the street as the city brings forward these really good ideas. But or council even generated the thinking about replanting, but you know, even council's not the experts in this either. So I'm just wondering whether or not there should be a recommendation one way or the other about the involvement of the ARB on things like these.
You bring up a good point, Jane, too, and maybe this is where Kim was going, but we did that with the streetscape standard. So when Tammy was asking about the brick sidewalks, I mean, that is something that we looked at holistically. So for the entire district, and then there's also street standards in the Bridge Park development, but you know, there's a expected quality character that is then applied, you know, throughout the various areas. And again, maybe that's something for this group to bring forward, like you said, a recommendation. And is it ARB? Is it something else? Are we setting up, you know, this sort of comprehensive expectations about what's going to happen? So I think that's a really great point that you bring up in this group to wrestle with and come back with a recommendation.
And Jane, we are putting a memo together for these walls and stuff that will go to ARB based on the council discussion. So that will cross your guys's desk, so to speak. And like I said, we totally agree with you. We want this to look like the old Dublin walls. It's just the construction of it for where it is, we got to work that out to make it work for both. And we're taking, I think, I can't remember what, there's a house just on the north end of South High on the east side that's got some walls out in front of their house. And while they're a more contemporary look, and that's not what we're going for, they do have a nice set of size walls and little columns And we're trying to work that in and put some of the bookends on the columns, at least, again, to bring that character that you see. There's some in the cemetery. They're around, historic Dublin. We're going to try to bring those in as little cap points. They're not going to be very often. It's probably, one or two per block kind of idea, just again, to bring that flavor in. But we definitely want it to look like that old school wall for sure.
Sure, that's good. Yeah, just
Yeah,
throw the question out there to think about.
I think this discussion kind of goes back to our early discussion about the difference between north of Bridge and south of Bridge, and that there's somewhere in there, there's a transition. And so maybe one way of looking at this is there might be a balance between contemporary and historic elements that work their way kind of both sides of Bridge Street, like the water pump that's at the corner of with the Bryhigh project. That to me is a more historic art piece, and maybe something drifts to the south that's more contemporary. And you think about it a little bit like that. And so you still get some historical elements, both in terms of art and furniture, maybe south of Bridge, but maybe north of Bridge, it becomes a little bit of mix of historic and contemporary, especially as you move towards the Ped Bridge, which is obviously a very contemporary statement also.
Kim, I want to just throw a thought in here, and then I'll get off. But you know what? One of the things that I think that's very noticeable, you just say this, north of Bridge and south of Bridge, we've become so contemporary north of Bridge. We're still so old world south of Bridge. And as we continue to develop, and especially if things change where Oscars is, if that gets redeveloped, pretty soon north of Bridge won't have anything traditional. You're right. We do have to really think about how we're going to make sure that there's a cohesiveness to the entire district, north and south of 161, and to make sure that you don't walk across the street and say there's nothing historic about this anymore. So you make a really good point. I think that's worth emphasizing.
I had another question for Sean, but it was about back to the park.
Okay.
If you could pull that back up. We've been having a lot of discussions about what's the name of the park or parks, because there's the Dublin Springs Park, which is on the other side of Bridge Street, right? So and then we talked about Kiwanis Park.
Kiwanis Park is over here.
That's that side of the river, right?
Yeah.
So what do we call the park
in here?
So what do we call the park where it says 5? Does that have a name?
So this is all Riverside Crossing Park, east, and this would be Riverside Crossing Park West, as I understand it today.
Yeah, that's what I remember seeing too.
Perfect.
I don't know if that'll change in the future, but right now that's what it is.
So the other thing we talked about with this park is about connectivity along the river, and especially linking back up to Indian Run. And is there a connection, a pathway connection that goes up to Indian Run, goes over High Street or under High Street, or what?
So currently, and you can kind of see the path system laid out on the west side here. This is what was master planned. This design has not been done yet. This is something that we are working on. There are also obviously some properties in here that the city does not have control of. So this was a look holistically as we move forward. Some of this stuff will probably shift and change. There are pathways that we're working on that goes up here behind Z2 and connects to that lower area by No Soliciting or underneath the Pearl. So there'll be a connection that will happen in there when these plans work through. The idea is there would be a connection that goes into the Dublin Springs area. And same thing, there'll be a connection up to North High Street, and how then you potentially come back or work your way north up to Emerald Parkway on the existing shared use path.
But no direct connection to Indian Run. You have to kind of go up the street and walk back to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to come up Rock Crest or come down here through the Grounds of Remembrance to get up into to that area.
Okay. And the other thing that we talked about was from I keep forgetting the name of it, from the park, Springs Park.
Yep.
There's no like designated route. If you're a pedestrian or you're on a bike and you come up to that park and then you come up to the Riverview, is it Riverview Street? Is there any talk about creating some kind of designated link that brings you up to High Street? Or you just use the street?
From this area, I mean, there's not in the plans today other than the sidewalks and such that are there today.
Well, there's no sidewalks, right, in that area, so you have to basically walk in the street to get up to High Street from that park, correct?
For example, I know there's the stairwell that exists here today that you could climb up, and then you would be on the sidewalk for West Bridge, which could take you up by sidewalks there. In these other areas, there's not. We're trying to make some connectivities with sidewalks from Z1 here up to North Street. And then again, that back loop up to the West Plaza. Because I don't believe there's any sidewalks here and it would not be accessible. We're trying to make the other accessible route actually that we talked about was going through Z2 with the elevator at one point during the master planning process. It's some things that we're still working as we get these plans moving forward that we will work out that weren't necessarily in this master plan as a whole, but gets down into the design as we move it forward.
Okay. So we could give some input to that in the
yes, by all means.
District plan, right? And then I don't want to take all the time, but one other question that the task force discussed at the last meeting was the Indian Run as it moves up through the falls. What is the scope of the park? Does it have a boundary, like along the school edge? What's the definition of the park? And is there currently kind of protections to that edge?
So I know it's in the stream corridor, but I don't remember how far that goes, how wide that goes in respect to the park land versus the school property, because there is a property line between the two. I just don't know what the balance of that is. I know there's a stream corridor protection that we would maintain, and that's the paths that are there is access, but we wouldn't push out beyond that, I guess, if that answers your question.
Well, we're just concerned that if the school site developed, we want to make sure that the developer doesn't have the right to build right up to the stream or start to encroach on that environment. And so we were discussing whether we needed to have some language in the plan that talks about the protection of that edge and setbacks or buffers. And I don't even know if that's in place. So if you could provide us with any information about that, I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, like what's the minimum setback?
Yeah, just simple things like that.
Because like right now, like what is it, like 60 feet for like R1? I think 60 or 80 feet. So I'm guessing anything, it'd be a minimum of that, but preferably more due to the, we would like to preserve the natural feel of the area. So is that something this group can recommend as like a setback from those natural areas in Dublin in order to preserve that character?
Yeah, I would say as part of your recommendations,
Okay.
You could look at, either defining that park more clearly. And as Kim said, then there are potential development restrictions for that area to preserve that, including setbacks adjacent to it.
Okay.
Hey, Jennifer, do either of you know, is there any kind of buffer protection in there that's more extensive?
I'd have to look at the code and see. I mean, it's zoned Bridge Street District Public. and that would allow certain development to happen there, but obviously it's in that neighborhood where we would want to preserve that area. But again, I don't know if it's explicitly says that. I'd have to look into that and see. So I think that again could be part of our future recommendations of the task force. Yeah.
I know typically we have whatever the stream corridor protection is, and then I know that we've done some work with the schools currently down by Veterans Park, where we've designated some areas as preservation areas. So I don't know the other half of, I guess, the zoning that you're talking about. We'll have to dig that up.
Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, again, if you look at our Discovery and you click on parks for the Indian Run Falls Park, it really pretty much includes that entire area on there, and I can maybe show that. But yeah, I had the same question of, is there some kind of existing easement, because that is on the school property. Can you all see my? Hold on.
Right, and the school track goes right up to it.
Right. So what I was suggesting was, can you all see this now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So the really light yellow or green area. So again, that shows the boundary, but that doesn't follow the property line. That really follows the edge of the tree, like the tree line, basically, and includes then the Indian Run in between there. So again,
I wonder if that's part of that that protection zone that we've designated with the schools. I don't know.
Yeah, so we can look into that, I guess, everyone, and see what that looks like to see how that would be involved in the recommendation.
Yeah, in our mapping exercise last time, we noted that as an issue, and I saw a lot of head nods that we wanted to have that conversation. So just want to make sure we don't miss it.
I know. I would like to say that council was really interested in your recommendation on that, because they originally, in the early Bridge Street district zoning, there was a roadway that was supposed to go along that park edge. Council did stop that and had them end North Street, specifically not to continue that on, waiting for recommendations on what will happen along the Indian Run ravine edge. So it's really, that's an important question for you to answer.
My kids would be remiss if I didn't. They did a lot of creek in that area.
Any other questions?
I really appreciate it, Sean. We kind of gave the floor to you and let you talk about what you felt was necessary for this group, but we really appreciate it. It's quite helpful.
Yep, I could have went down the pool path and a couple other places and projects going on. Tried to stay here.
I like the direction you took then.
Thank you, Sean.
And you really helped clarify some things and bring some new things to light that I hadn't been thinking about. So very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I wanted to somewhat talk about our next meeting. As Kim mentioned, we did do the mapping exercise. I'm not sure if everyone was able to either participate or view the information that we have online, but it was really helpful. We basically were attempting to merge your comments with actual physical locations in the district that you wanted to point to for references. And I think it turned out really well. And we appreciate you being so thorough with your analysis. So what we're attempting to do at the next meeting is to take all of those comments that we acquired at that meeting and take a look back at the previous area plan for the historic district and see where those commonalities are, and potentially where there might be room for more discussion for this group to make recommendations. So again, trying to lead you down the path of being able to make some solidified recommendations to council.
And Tammy, can people still comment on that map?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if everybody that wasn't there had a chance to do that, but I would encourage those folks to visit the map and add anything that you want to it.
Yeah, and if there's any issues with either navigating it or if there's any issues, just let us know. We can help you get through that process.
And I think too, given this discussion and some of the information provided, that again, looking at that even together next time would probably be beneficial too, just to add to or make sure that there are no additional comments or things that we would want to look at now that things have been a little clarified. I think that would be a good opportunity as well.
Okay. I'm always amazed at this group. You guys are always so positive. I love your energy. You make it easy for us. So with that, Kim, do you have any parting comments?
I think that was my parting comment about the mapping exercise.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this turned out to be exactly what at least I personally was hoping to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of information about what's going on, and I think it's really going to inform our discussions.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there any other group or information that you all feel like you would like to have that we could have at our next meeting too? And if you think of something afterwards, then let us know. We can try to make that happen.
Really helpful, and I appreciate you all setting that up. I think it was there's a lot going on that we weren't aware of, and a lot to absorb there. But yeah, thank you.
I want to just throw one thing in that maybe the group doesn't know about, but the City Council is embarking on starting a community conversation about what Dublin looks like in 2035. So it's important for you as you go through this process of making your recommendations about what you like about the district or the central core of the city in your mapping exercise to also kind of think long-term about what you would like to just say to council or to be part of the community conversation about what could this look like in 2035, not just today or in 5 years, but what is the ideal look of the downtown core? So, kind of put your creativity thoughts together on that as you kind of wrap up your recommendations, and think long-term too, to see if you can help drive that vision a little bit. So I didn't know if you're aware of that, but in case you weren't, that's something that we're going to be talking about a lot in the next coming year. And I think your input's going to be really valuable. So we welcome those comments.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jane, for mentioning that. Okay, well, with that, then I think we'll be adjourned, and then we will send out then appointment for next meeting starting at 4:30, and we'll engage with those that have a conflict with this time frame.
Do we have a date for that next meeting that you know of? Just so we can.
It should be the 1st.
Yes, September 1st.
September 1st, yeah.
September 1st at 4:30.
Yep. And then the next one after that I have is September the 15th.
Okay.
That's right.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all and have a great